All right, welcome to the DFL Before DNF podcast. The whole idea of the podcast is that, it's representing the runners who are in it because they love it, who don't mind finishing last place if we have to. We just absolutely love this sport. We love being out in it. We love the suffering, and the gifts that the suffering brings on the other side to what it tells us about ourselves. And so this message has manifested itself in a handful of ways over the half a year that I've been doing the podcast. But right now I'm in a stretch where I'm just doing deep dive into races because my body is unable to run every race out there. So I at least want to learn about them all. I want to talk about them all. I want you all to hear about them, especially because I think one of the major issues in our industry right now is how to find a new race. And I say major issue, but it's a real thing that when I talk to runners, like they don't know how to find or always know how to find a great next race. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to do is to say, yeah, we know about the great races. We know about UTMB. We know about Western States. Those deserve the attention that they have. But hey, there's hundreds of other races out there. And today we're going to go into depth on one that I think is super interesting, mainly because of this one statistic that 3 of 21 runners finished it last year in 2023. They're about to run the 2024 of Devil's Gulch. Comes to us by way of Evergreen Trail Runs. So I've got two people joining me today, two new friends, Porter and Katie of Evergreen Trail Runs. So welcome, Porter and Katie. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So yeah, we want to, let's just jump in. And so the way that this works is that we talk about the race, and through the course of it, we learn about you. Like the beauty of this sport is that it's all about the people and it's all about the course. And so, as we learn about Devil's Gulch, as hear about this crazy stat, 3 and 21, I'm interested to get to the bottom of how such a thing can happen and what that says about the course and about the area and everything. So going into Devil's Gulch, maybe Porter, start with you. Devil's Gulch. It is a race that's owned by Evergreen Trail Runs. How about you answer the first question? What is Evergreen Trail Runs?
Yeah, we are a race production company. We are located in Western Washington, Washington State, not Washington, D.C. And we, just for clarification, and we produce everything from 5Ks to 100-miler, which is Devil's Gulch. And mostly we cater to a wide variety of trail runners, but we definitely like to welcome those who are newer to the sport, whether they're coming from the road world, the triathlon world, or just are jumping straight into it. We what's going on there? And we take pride in our events. We have an emphasis, like I said, on welcoming beginners. We also have a big emphasis on environmental sustainability. We're a carbon neutral race production company. We have a lot of practices as well around reducing waste, especially, and looking for creative ways to reduce our carbon footprint for our races.
That's cool. And Katie, before we get in to a race specific question for you, we talked the other day and you told me something that I just am generally intrigued to hear more about. You forecast avalanches. And do you do race directing in your spare time and avalanche forecast is your main job? I mean, I guess there's only certain times a year where you're able to forecast an avalanche, but tell me about you and Evergreen Trails and avalanche prediction. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, well, we try not to say we predict avalanches because they're very challenging to predict, actually.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I do. I work for the Northwest Avalanche Center. I'm an avalanche forecaster for regions on the east side of the Cascades.
Okay.
And so basically in the winter, I am out in the mountains digging in the snow and then writing reports to publish. So other people recreating in the snow know what the avalanche conditions are and can recreate more safely. And yeah, when I started with Evergreen, I was a ski patroller. And I think that the two dovetail well together. Now that I am part owner and race director for all of our races, it is, the race stuff never really goes away in the winter. So I just work a lot. But my busy race season is the summer and my busy forecasting season is the winter, obviously. So it works out well. And it's a pretty special privilege that I have to have both of these jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like it. So if I think about like, avalanche forecasting in Western Washington, I mean, you probably have a really good grip on let's say the terrain. So why don't we start with you and just kind of, how would you describe Devil's Gulch? Like, let's just talk course. Let's talk where it's at. Like I fly into Seattle. How do I get there? And then what's the course like?
Yeah, so if you flew into Seattle, you would likely drive over Snoqualmie Pass and then over Blewett Pass. So 2 mountain passes to get over here onto the east side of the Cascades. The east sides of the Cascades, they tend to be a bit drier and like more sparsely vegetated. Like we got a lot of ponderosa pine forests, lots of cool rock features and stuff like that. But also, we still have like creeks and that you'll run up, and it's just a different environment. I really like it. It tends to be a little bit drier, a little bit warmer. And then I would say like rocky is a good way to describe the course. There's a lot of technical sections, lots of cool rock formations too to distract you as you're running. And then we also have a lot of these trails are open to mountain bikes and motorized use. So like there is some really nice smooth single track running as well. So you get a really good mix. But it's definitely, it's going to be kind of warm and dry, and you can expect some rocky technical running as well.
Yeah. Tell me about the gain. What's the gain like on this race?
There's about 24,000 feet of elevation gain in the 100-mile race. So it's steep. Okay. You spend a lot of time up on ridges, and which is beautiful. The views are absolutely stunning. Yeah. I think if you're looking for a 100-miler with really good views, you can see, for part of the course, you'll be able to see all the Cascade volcanoes and Mount Stewart as you're running along. Mm-hmm.
So when thinking about the technical aspect of it, Katie, that you alluded to, are you running in like rocky, like dried out riverbeds? Like what makes it technical? Is it roots? Is it rocks? What makes it technical?
Many sections with loose rocks that you're running on, and some deep dusty sections as well.
Okay. So Porter, question for you about Evergreen. And I'm interested in both of this for you. So as we also provide context, one of the things I love about ultra running is that, man, just about every race director I can think of also is a runner, runs races. I was going to say maybe except for old Laz, but Laz actually was a phenomenal runner. He just, and I see him smoking now. I don't know that he's still active in it, but you were at Zion when I was at Zion. You just ran the 100K down there. Tell me about. Yeah, just kind of curious about, you as a runner. Were you a runner before you started Evergreen? Tell me about you.
Yeah, running and I go back. When I was a kid, I did not like running. I did cross country for one season because there was a girl on the team that I was chasing, and which did not work out. But cross country and I only got along. Yeah, that was a one season fling. And when I was in college, I discovered triathlon and did that for many years and did Ironmans and all that. And really enjoyed it when I had more free time, more energy and whatnot. But it was also, triathlon is great, but for me personally, I think the stress that I put on myself, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And it ultimately led me down to a place of I developed an eating disorder, and that was very cyclical, and exercise was a part of it. And so, after about 7 years of triathlon, I got injured, and I kind of took that as a cue to give it a break, and slowly transitioned into trail running, and just focusing on running, but also trail running, and found that to be a better fit for myself as far as like my mental health and whatnot. And so I've been running for a while. I kind of took a couple year break when we were having kids. I had a little bit less time and energy. Not that I have more time or energy now, but just make it work with running. So So yeah, I designed 100K was my first try, the 100K distance.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, I've run a bunch of 50K and 50 milers, and I'm working up to hopefully running a 100 miler, which I tell everybody when my youngest child is in kindergarten. I
Yeah.
think will be the year I'll do a 100 miler because
Yeah. I mean,
I just have so much time then.
yeah. Well, the risk with that is that you saying it publicly is that like
Yeah.
that's objective. When
Yes.
when your
Yes.
child is in kindergarten, you better be running a 100 miler.
Yeah. Well,
Would you choose Devil's Gulch as a first 100 miler? That's a question for you. Would you run that? I mean, it sounds like a beast. We haven't even really got into it, but it sounds like a beast. What would your first 100 miler be? Let's go there.
that's a great question. I have not picked one out. My friend, I have a good friend, Marisa, who works for the company as well, and I paced her, had her first 100 miler.
Okay.
She did the Oregon Cascades 100.
Okay.
It was kind of a more gentle 100 miler. I think it has like 10,000 feet elevation gain total.
Yeah.
And I remember like running with her. That seemed like that was a positive experience. It was not. She was running even at the end, and so that left an impression on me. But
yeah,
maybe it is fitting that I would run Devil's Gulch as my first 100 miler in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. Nobody listening knows how old my daughter is, so I could possibly could be in 3 years or 4 years or
maybe she's not even born yet.
Yeah, maybe she's hypothetical. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
well,
I think if yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, okay, so if you've got, you're going to, you've transitioned from road running, tries, all that sort of stuff. You mentioned the mental health piece. I mean, it's one of my favorite conversations. Like people who externally people think of ultra marathon runners as these super fit people, and of course, fitness is a prerequisite. But what I always say is, like, when you're out on the course, it's among the least important things that we're doing when we're out on the course. Like, there's just this beautiful, at times, like, healing potential that comes through these. I know you got to have tools in your tool belt to know how to let ultra running be good for your mind. Like, it's not, I mean, the chemicals firing inherently are beyond our control and they're doing good things for us. But you mentioned the mental health piece. Like, I'm just curious from your take, like what is the gift of ultra running to you when it comes to mental health?
I think there's a mental quieting that comes about from running for me. That when my body is engaged in something like running, and for other people it might be something else, but for me, when my body's engaged in that way, in that kind of low level demand of running, it is really easy for my mind to like settle down a little bit and kind of wander around. When I'm at home or working or whatever, it is really hard to let my mind rest. And so I think even though your body is not resting, your mind is while you're running, and it's also a very helpful time. Like, that's when I feel like I have most of my good ideas are while I'm running.
Me too.
Got to stop and write myself a note frequently. It's a little tedious at times, all the pauses, but it's worth it.
Yes.
And I mean, of course, there's always the post-run serotonin boost and whatnot. That's great, but for me, it is like slowing down my mind and quieting like the anxiety. For me,
that. Well, Katie, tell me about you as a runner. I mean, between your demanding winter job and what sounds like your demanding summer job of race directing and co-owning these races, like, are you running in the mud seasons? When are you running? And I mean, tell me about you as a runner.
I started running kind of by accident because I got a husky in college and I was like, oh my God, what do I do with this dog? And so I started running. Awesome. And I started as a road runner and actually like did really well. Like, I had really good marathon times, but I really struggled with my digestion and everything. And when I got into trail running, it was like the cadence is so different. Like, you get to hike quickly up the hills, and and you got to be in the mountains, which is part of my love. And I think many of us use running as like therapy or a release for our minds and our mental health. And I'm definitely one of those. I always say it, like, it allows me to breathe, even though I'm breathing hard. Cause it's, my work life is fairly demanding, and I'm always like thinking about things and thinking really critically. And when you're deep in it and you're just letting your mind, kind of like Porter said, take a break. I have good ideas. I can think through things a little bit more clearly, I feel like.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
And in the winter, unfortunately, it has. I don't get to run very much in the winter. I try to maintain, but over here on the east side, like, there's 3 feet of snow on the ground normally all winter long. So I will get out and I'll run on like groomed snowmobile trails and like hard packed surfaces, but it's just harder to really get those distances in. But sure. I will be hopefully running my first 50 miler this year. And setting up to run 100 next summer. So
love it.
Nice. I really am like enjoying these longer distances, and I've had some knee problems, and so I'm just taking it really slowly and making sure to stay strong so I can keep running, because I don't want to push myself to a distance where it might mean one day that I'm not going to be able to run at all. So
totally
excited.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So you both mentioned mental health. I think this is an interesting thing. I mean, since, I don't always have like the owners or the race directors on the race. So I think this is interesting. You both seeing the value in mental health, which just about everybody does in the sport. Katie, for you, how do you think now, with you and Porter both mentioning that, how does it play out as race directors and owner of this race? Do you feel like there's anything you're doing different for the races that are better for that? I mean, and I know that's kind of an odd question, but I'm just thinking, since you both mentioned it, I wonder if there's something, in a Devil's Gulch or any of your races really that show that you're paying more attention to that. It's an interesting thought.
That is an interesting question. I think I really try to be supportive of our runners, and because things go right in races, things go wrong in races. And I try to interact individually with everybody and make sure that they feel supported at our races. And I also just try to have like little extras, like really good food at the aid stations and generous cutoff times. Like for our, at Devil's Gulch, we also have a 50 miler. And I basically said, well, everybody's still going to be there. So I'm not going to, the cutoffs for the 50 miler are the same as the 100. So like if you can finish 50 before everybody's 100-mile cutoff, like, you're good. And so things like that, you can't always cater to everybody, but I really try hard to make sure everybody feels like they're in a supportive environment, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah, what I love about what you said is, as I was asking that question, I was thinking, how do you answer this question? But you answered it perfectly. But it's cutoff times. It brings in the people who are out there who maybe aren't the best at performers here, and it leaves room for people to have a really bad race. If they thought they were going to have a good race, it leaves room for them to have a really bad race. And if their mind is able to continue to engage, I think that's an awesome answer to that. So like, what is the cutoff for Devil's Gulch?
The 100-mile has a 37-hour cutoff.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Devil's Gulch reminds me a little bit of Wasatch 100 from what I'm hearing at this point, in terms of how much gain, 24,000. And Wasatch has a 36-hour cutoff. I think it's a very generous cutoff. Like, Western States blows my mind at a 30-hour cutoff. Like, everybody wants to run it. I would love to run it. If I can get into it someday, I would be pumped. But I don't know if I could do it in 30 hours. Like, that's a wild cutoff. So I love the 37-hour cutoff. That's great. That's a good answer to that question. Porter, do you have any thoughts? I mean, I saw you as I was asking the question. I mean, with this this sport giving you such a gift of like the mental health piece, do you see that as like playing itself out as a owner and race director?
Yeah, we have a couple of policies in place. I should say policies, but we try to be, I think, really welcoming. Like I said earlier, we really want to welcome all runners. So, we have like a youth, if you're high school age or college age, basically there's an automatic discount, just in recognition of that your earning potential is probably not as great as it is if you're if you're older. We work with the Trail Mix Fund so that essentially anybody who wants to might not have the financial capability to get in is able to apply to the Trail Mix Fund to get a free entry to the race, to our races.
Yeah.
And that's specifically targeted towards increasing diversity and inclusion at the races. That's their whole emphasis. And then we also work with a couple of clubs. There's a few minority clubs that we've had contact with and have worked with them to help get their members into our races. Whether that's through a discount or just talking to them and establishing a relationship and making sure they know that everybody is welcome, regardless of their identity, whether that's their race or their gender orientation or sex orientation.
Yeah.
But everybody is welcome. So we have that on our website very clear. Yeah. But then on the back end too, just making sure that everybody feels welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I have never heard of anyone doing, you didn't necessarily word it this way, but like a sliding scale registration fee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cause like I've never heard of that. It's just making me think right now, like that's pretty brilliant as a race director. Have you heard of that? Were you inspired by somewhere, or was that just sort of like, hey, I mean, it's one of those things that's like so logical.
Yeah.
But how come that's cool that you're doing it?
I mean, probably my wife thought of it. I feel like most of the good ideas that we've had have come from her. I claim a few of them. It was probably her idea, but it does make sense. I think maybe more so in road running, but in running in general, I think there is an age problem of, the average age of runners is getting older. Like younger people are not as interested in running as we would like them to be because it's so great. And so attracting them with maybe a discount is one way to help bring them in. Yeah.
I love that. All right. I've been holding off. I gotta understand this. Three finishers out of 21 who ran the 100-miler last year. So important to note, you have lots of distances at Devil's Gulch. My bias always tends to be the 100-miler because I just have an amazing affection for the 100-miler, inexplicable affection for the 100-miler. So I know you have a lot of other distances. So I'm just talking about the 100-miler. 21 people started it last year and 3 people finished it. Katie, let's start with you because when we were going back and forth some before, you had a kind of a good grip on this. I mean, how does that happen? What was that unique to 2023? Was it weather or is it the course? Like 3 of 21, that just feels like that's a crazy stat. What do you think?
The course is hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good one. I think, the course is really hard. And it was really hot. It just happened to be kind of a heat wave.
Yeah.
And I do have like a 2-liter water carrying capacity requirement. And, I think that the heat just did it in, one of the 4th place, he would have been 4th, but he actually dropped and he's my neighbor. He lives next to me. And he said that the sun came up on day 2 and he was just like, no, I can't do it. So I think,
really? That's it.
Yeah. And I think it's, whenever you put on a new race, you don't really know what's going to happen and weather's just going to do what weather is going to do. But I think, a little bit, it was a little easy to underestimate a new course. And then and the combination of the heat, just kind of crushed people. So I'm really excited to see how 2024 goes and maybe we'll get a bunch more finishers. Maybe it'll be a lot cooler. It snowed in the mountains yesterday, just on June 15th, which is a little crazy. Nice. So I don't know. Wild. It doesn't really mean anything for a month from now, but it'll be really interesting to see.
Runners timing out, or were runners just electing to quit even though they still had time?
They were electing to quit even though they still had time.
Okay.
We had, it got nicknamed Lucifer's Loop. There's a little loop in the big loop, and it's a little bit lower in elevation and like pretty exposed. And you come back to one of our aid stations. So a lot of people dropped there. And then a lot of people dropped. Yeah. So we're actually hoping to change this for 2025. A new trail was built. So I actually talked to the Forest Service this morning and it's looking positive that it'll be a
cool.
single loop 100 in the future. But right now it's 2 loops of the 50-mile course. And a lot of people came in at 50 miles and said, nope, I'm good. And so I think they were really stoked, right? We still just gave them a time for the 50 miler instead of like a DNF.
Yes.
And so they could just drop down in distance,
like
basically. That. Yeah. And, you know, even the people who quit were like, this was an amazing race. And so as a race director, when I really felt like, oh my gosh, everybody's dropping out, what have I done? To have somebody say, this was like one of the most amazing races that I've done, even though I didn't finish, was like really special to me. And a lot of the, you know, Tomo, who was he was our first place finisher, had flown over along with a handful of other runners because the Vermont 100 was canceled. And so that drew people to our race actually last year, totally
interesting
by accident. And so these were people who'd like flown from the East Coast to be here at our race. And nice. So to have them have gone through that much just to be there and then not finish and be so stoked about it at the same time was really special. Yes. Honestly, it felt better than any of my running accomplishments just to be there for these runners.
Yeah. That's awesome. For me, when I think about like, you know, my story is I've DNF'd 8 of 10 attempts. But when I look back at all 8 of those, when I have not finished, there has never been one moment where I've thought, you know, damn this race director, the course, like everyone, I have no regrets. Of course, I wish I would have finished, but it did not diminish my experience at all. And I think sometimes getting beat by the course is just what we need. Like one of my favorite, you know, as I was working through this last documentary we did, was thinking like, how do I word this? Like trail running saves me and trail running breaks me, but trail running saves me by breaking me. Like being broken by a course, like going and running Devil's Gulch and, you know, 18 people not finishing, like those, I got to imagine that most of those people look back on that experience fondly. It's like it's a feather in their cap, even when they DNF. And then to know now, like, I know last year was hotter than usual. Maybe it was a fluke of a year, but to know that this course is like a mean course, like a Lucifer's Loop and, you know, Devil's Gulch in the name, like that, to be beat by that course is, to me, if I were to think about it, is just as good as beating the course itself. Like maybe it beats me today, maybe I beat it. I'm just glad that I went there and tried it, because if I'm not running it to win it anyways, I'm there to learn stuff about myself. I'm there to do something that's really hard. And so on some levels, what I'm loving about what I'm hearing about this race is that it's a beast. It's a good beast. I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's a beast with
I've got an idea,
views.
Katie. We should rename all the sections of the course with different, you know, the devil has many names, right? Satan, Lucifer, Leviathan, that old serpent. We go real biblical and give all the sections of the course different, you know, versions. You dig into, you know, biblical terminology here.
Yes.
I think you're onto something.
You brand it around that. Like, I mean, it's epic.
Lightbringer, because that's what Lucifer means in Latin, you know? Anyways.
Wherever the average person is at around sunrise, that can be, you know, Lightbringer. Yeah. I actually, from someone who loves branding, I think that's actually quite brilliant, because then your aid station captains, all that sort of stuff, they own certain sections of the race. Think of the T-shirt potential. I think there's a lot of fun.
Beelzebub could be like, involved.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you mentioned Tomo. When 3 runners finish out of 21, do you know all their names? Like, did you shake all their hands? Like, tell me about the 3 people.
I should have looked up our second place. I cannot remember his name. Tomo finished 12 hours in front of the second person. So I actually got to know him. Like, he hung out, he waited for every other 100-miler to finish and congratulated them all. And just got to hear a little bit of his story.
That's cool.
He is a basically a professional runner from Japan. He was doing the Grand Slam of Ultras. And when Vermont was canceled, he had to sub a race in, and Devil's Gulch was it. And he was such an interesting individual, so kind and so thoughtful, and, a story like a lot of us, like,
that's cool.
Like running to be healthier and be fit and just to be a good voice in his community. And so it was really amazing to chat with him for so long and have him hang out. A lot of people are like, okay, I'm done. I just ran 100 miles. I'm out of here. But I thought he showed a lot of support for our other 100 milers to just hang out. And then, I said, I can't remember the name.
Matt Scarlett. Matt Scarlett was number 2.
Yes. And his family was there, which was amazing. And there were some tears. And it just felt really good to shake his hand. And, none of these people, it was not their first 100. They were very experienced, and they all came in and were like, that was rough. And then our third place finisher was actually a really good friend of mine, Richard Kresser. And, he was determined. I was texting with his wife the whole time. And, I remember distinctly, I was like, hey, Kresser, it's okay. You can stop at 50 miles. And he was like, I haven't DNF'd and I'm not going to start now. And he told me he took 17 naps or something along the way. And finished. And it was hard. And he's run a bunch of 100s and even 200-mile races. And so it's I think it was a humbling experience for everybody, but it was those are people that I feel like are part of the Evergreen story now. And I think that's really special.
I don't think Richard, he has a lot of running in the past, but he called me 6 weeks before the race. He had some question about unrelated. And at the end of the phone call, he was like, yeah, I guess I should start running, getting ready. And I was like, cause I don't think he ran hardly at all before Devil's Gulch. He truly ran it off the couch, and just relied on not so much muscle memory, but he has got a lot of grit, and has done many, many very impressive feats of endurance. So I think he just relied on that backwater or that reserve of grit. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, what this is making me think of, there's certain types of races that it's crazy stories like that. It's that type of person that, can go out and do the course, off the couch. But, I think about a Barkley. By and large, that race isn't bringing marquee runners, and absolutely no disrespect to people like Jared Campbell. It's bringing out the best, toughest runners in the world. But, Killian's not running it. And Courtney runs it sometimes, and has been beat up by it. And no disrespect. Oh, has he? Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many I think he got?
What's that? I don't know. I don't know if he finished, but I know that I follow him on. I think he's kind of famous in Japan, honestly, for running.
Okay.
And he did he has a documentary. It's in Japanese, but about his experience at Barkley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Then this is perfect. This is actually this is helping make my point. There's when we think about European races, we think about UTMB, but there's 1,000 other races over there that are interesting. No disrespect to UTMB. Over here, if they're in Europe and they're looking at America, they think of Western states. But there's hundreds of other great races, and that are going to test you in different ways. And what I'm hearing here is it's just making me think about those like Ure, 42,000 feet of gain over 100 miles. It just brings out a unique type of runner who isn't running for the podium. Now, asterisk, sound like Tomo is a different breed, but he's going for a finish at Barkley, or he's going for, getting first place here. What I'm picking up on this race is that there's a grassroots element to it. There's a familial feel to it. There's race directors who are paying attention to the runners. I had a friend describe Scout Mountain this way the other day, and I think it's how every race should be described. It's people who don't know you but love you. That's ultra running. You guys care about your runners. You're trying to bring people in. That people are swinging for the fence of a lifelong goal. And then with Devil's Gulch, you're kind of serving them up a really hard course, and it feels kind of like a challenge. Like, hey, you're going for other races, or this could be your first race. Like, come run one that's real hard. That this Tomo from Japan looks like he got a sub 24. Just looked it up. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but I'm also sort of just excited about this idea of like what you both are putting on out there. I don't know. Any thoughts? No specific question, and I know I'm just rambling, but am I onto something? What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I think that, I'm partial to Eastern Washington, so I love this course. Like, I run out there all the time myself. I mountain bike out there. And I think it's beautiful and special in a unique way. It's not just in the forest. And I think I'm trying to split the difference between having a really hard race, but that is friendly to newer runners. Porter was talking about his aspirations to run 100 that another friend of mine was in that race as well. And we were laughing because I do better on steep courses, because of that cadence change. I am not as good as keeping a steady place on really runnable single track for 100 miles, I think might break me. Whereas if I get a chance to walk up a really, really steep hill for a handful of miles, it changes up how I'm using my body and kind of allows me to then pick it up again on the downhills. And so, yeah, I think that every race is different and every race is a journey. And I want to make it friendly enough that people feel that it's approachable, not a Barkley marathon, but also challenging enough to entice some runners who are ooh, I want to try something really hard and I want to try to do it fast. And
Porter, question for you.
A
preliminary question. How many total races does Evergreen Trail Runs have? It looks like you have a bunch. How many do you have?
We have 11 trail races. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's say you're talking to someone who's maybe run a 50K or a half marathon on trail. So they're already in your ecosystem. They kind of know your ethos, the way that you care about runners, the way that you want to be inclusive. What's the sell to get them to go to Devil's Gulch? How do you talk about Devil's Gulch with people who are already kind of understand what you're about?
Yeah, we like you mentioned earlier, we do have 3 distances. So if somebody didn't want to run a 100-miler, they could run a half marathon or a 50-miler. Yeah. There's also a free kids race as well.
I love that. Yes.
If you're a child at heart and don't want to pay for a race entry, but still want to say you ran Devil's Gulch, you could do that. We don't check IDs. What's the sell for somebody who Devil's Gulch if they've already run? Yeah, for me, I feel like trail running, that kind of trail running, is hard. And I remember back when I did triathlons, the run portion of the triathlon, which comes after the swim and the bike, and it's you're running. If it's a hot day, you're not running at 7 a.m. You're running at it could be 2 p.m. and you're on asphalt and it's hot. It is, and you've just already swam and bike, so you're tired. Yeah. And for me, it's about, I think you want to know, what can you really do? What are you really made out of? Are you really, can you do it? Are you tough enough? Do you want it badly enough? And it exposes you in a way and makes you question, why am I doing this? What is the point? What is the point of life? Why do these hard things? And you have to have a really good reason for that. Because if you don't, then you're not going to, your answer is going to be well, this is dumb. I'm going to stop. Right. And so every person has to have, their reason. And I think that we are about, like Katie said, having an environment where we are supporting people and caring about them in this really challenging, personal, possibly intimate, vulnerable situation where they're really everything is stripped away. There's no pretensions of bravado or anything like that, but it's just you and the course and your own inner motivations. And so if we can provide an environment where we're supporting people and making sure that they feel that we care about them, even though we may not know them,
Yeah. Isn't
then
that good? Isn't that a good
yeah,
description of the sport?
yeah.
Are you,
Yeah.
would you say that everything that you just said represents each distance? I mean, that clearly represents your 100-miler at Devil's
Yeah.
Gulch. Do you think, like, if someone's running, what are your 3 distances?
A half marathon, a 50-mile, and a 100-miler.
Okay. Do you feel like someone who's never run a half marathon on a trail, what you just described, it's going to be the same experience? Like it's a humbling challenge sort of
I mean,
course?
yeah, it's definitely not an easy half marathon, but like I forget who said it, but quantity has a quality all of its own. And so I don't know that you necessarily have any life-changing experiences on the half marathon course, but it has the same scenery, the same feel, the same views, the same heat and the dust and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I think it can be a smaller, in all dimensions, version of that 100-mile experience.
Yeah. Katie, what about you when you're talking to this about Devil's Gulch, because you got all those other races, in let's call it a portfolio, other races in your portfolio. If someone's trying to pick a race, when are you going to bring up Devil's Gulch to them? Like, what's the context? When is it someone who likes to be challenged? Like Porter was just saying, like, who is this the right race for? Maybe that's my question from your perspective when you're having conversations about it.
Yeah, I think if somebody is looking for a challenge and to run a course that I truly believe is like incredibly beautiful,
yeah,
I would definitely recommend Devil's Gulch. Depending on what distances they're looking at, right? And I would say like the half isn't an easy half. I think there's 2,500 feet of elevation gain in it.
Oh, nice.
But when I pre-ran the half course for the first time, I fell in love with it. I thought it was amazing, like friendly climbing, just enough technical sections to keep it interesting for me personally, and then like miles of really smooth single track to run too. And like the whole time you're looking over the Wenatchee Valley and the Columbia River, and so I think it's just a beautiful course. And so I think for people kind of maybe, I would say, looking to either step up in their distance, they've run a bunch of 50Ks, I might try to sell them on the 50-miler. For people looking at that 100-mile distance, I would kind of be like, I wouldn't be like, this is going to be a super easy first 100. But again, I think the generous cutoff time helps. And I'd be like, like, again, sometimes like I need the views to keep going, like when you're in it and you're in the forest, like sometimes like when I'm pre-running our Tiger Peak course, I'm like, where am I? I'm just like in the woods. It's hot. It's humid. And, but when I get to the top, I feel immediately better. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's Mount Rainier. And I can like, kind of gives you that energy, a little bit like when the sun comes up in the morning and you've been running all night, you're like, oh yeah, okay. I think that the views have that same experience. So
I can do this.
I think those are the runners that I'm selling it to. If somebody really wants an easy first trail run altogether, I might not recommend Devil's Gulch, but, again, there's a certain personality that just has a little bit more grit and wants to go out there and be like, I think something that's important about trail running is like, we fail sometimes, and like, for me, I like that lesson, when I'm running is like, hey, sometimes it's not the day. And I think that as long as you're comfortable with that, anybody could run Devil's Gulch.
Well, I'm excited. I'm going to come up and hang out. I'm bringing my buddy Ben, and we're going to shoot a little documentary on it. I love the stories coming out of it. I love what you all are about. So anybody wants to come hang, I'll be there. But to land the plane here, do you all have any final thoughts, any last things you want to say about the race? I think what we've seen to this point is that it's a pretty dang good race. That's hard, but just like when my mind's always blown. I released an episode today on High Lonesome 100 with a woman named Bree Sullivan, and it was her first 100-miler, and that's a crazy hard course. Like so much of it is above 10,000 feet, or a lot of people run Wasatch 100 as their first 100-miler. It's like, these are crazy races that I would think, don't you want to build up to those? But a lot of people don't care. So like this is a really great first 100-miler because of the ethos, I think, of what you guys are bringing in the as race directors in the race organization. But either of you have any final thoughts before we close up today? Good.
I don't know.
Now,
Yeah, I think
I would just add, you do get a belt buckle. You get a belt buckle when you finish, and I make it by hand in my garage.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Will you send me pictures of it?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's made out of wood with a metal back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. That's I can't believe I didn't ask about the belt buckle. That's the reason I do these things.
Gotta have a belt buckle. Yeah.
Katie, what about you? Anything?
I just I appreciate you having the conversation with us, and just to anybody out there listening, if you're worried, email me and I can chat with you. And we got a bunch of other races too. If super hard, hot 50, 100 miles aren't for you.
Yeah. Well, I love what y'all are doing in Washington. I can't wait to come hang out with you, meet you both in person, and to see what comes out of that race. Tomo sounds like an interesting figure. We chatted briefly about him before. I'm going to look him up and see if he'll join us at some point too. So that'd be fun.
I've got one more anecdote about Tomo.
Yeah.
So last year he ran at the race in July, and then in October, my wife and I went on vacation to Japan.
Okay.
And we were in Kyoto, which is not where Tomo lives. He lives in Tokyo. And I was meeting my wife at a shrine, and so I had run there. And I was getting some iced coffee from a coffee stand. And the guy selling me the coffee was like, "Oh, did you run here?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I don't remember how it came up, but he was like, "Do you know Tomo?" And I was like, "Do I know Tomo?" And so it turns out this guy is Toru, who ran the coffee stand, is a friend of Tomo's, and is a huge runner himself as well. So, yeah, he's huge in Japan.
I love it. Well, yeah, we're gonna chase him down and I'm gonna talk to him because I think that's super cool. Well, all right. Well, good luck. I'll see you both in a month, and
all right.
Looking forward to it. And I'll post the race in the show notes, and we'll go from there. But I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a good day.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you too.
Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.